Awesome. So glad to have you here on the first day of August in 2010. And so seriously, like how many of you guys have had like some horror story first dates? Anybody have some horror story? Okay, not as many as first service. Okay, this must be the together crowd. But I know I had so many of them. Susie was saying you can't tell all these bad days, but one I had where I got together with a girl to go and meet my best friend. One of my best friends was going to be flying through the Detroit airport, and he had about a 2-hour layover. And he was on his way to propose to his girlfriend. So he wanted me to meet her and hang out with her for a little bit. And so I had this grand idea of creating them this huge meal. This was way before 9/11, okay? So I made this big, huge meal, and I asked this one girl if she would actually come with me. So I was interested in her and thought, would she want to come? And so we walk into the airport. I have a cooler, okay, a big, huge cooler. She's got a backpack with this big loaf of bread sticking out the back. This is, man, can you imagine doing that these days? But we come flying in, all this kind of stuff, and I show up, and his whole family and all these friends are there. And it wasn't just us. And I get there, and I'm like, I've got this whole meal, and he looks at me, and he says, oh, dude, we just had Burger King. And so the meal thing didn't work out, so we kind of leave, and we're taking off, and it's about 9:30 now, and we're driving through Detroit, okay? Now, actually, anybody ever driven through Detroit? Okay, you don't get out when you drive in Detroit. So we're driving through looking for a safe place to go to a park to eat our dinner. We finally find one. And it's about 10 o'clock by this time, and we get out, and it's that awkward first date stuff where you're asking weird questions and, trying to get to know each other. And then all of a sudden, you guys, out of nowhere, this gust of wind came flying through. And I'm talking a gust of wind. It took everything on our table and threw it right on top of her. So I'm sitting there. I mean, literally, the cooler flew off the picnic table. That's how big this thing was. So she's sitting there with her plate of food and their drink all over her. And that, I think that, hopefully was not a prophetic moment, but of the rest of the deal. So first dates, man, those type of things, lots of weird experiences. And what I want to share with you today, when we talk about defining moments in our life, in fact, I don't know if you saw the picture. It was a fork in the road. When you hit these, and everything's different from then on. And I was going to share with you guys about my time in California, which was probably the most difficult period of my life, where God was really confusing and different things, and just learning to trust Him. And I looked at what everybody else was going to talk with you about in the next few weeks. And I decided to do something different. And what I want to share with you guys today, because when I thought about what is a real defining moment for me, it was God bringing me, or my path crossing the path with this woman right over here, with Susie. And so I'm going to share with you guys some of the principles that I feel like that God worked in my life. Now, here's the deal. I just know that one of the things you need to understand right off the bat is this is our story, okay? It's not your story. Everybody's story is really completely different, okay? But I do want to share with you some of the principles that are in there. So let me just ask you real quick, how many of you are single? How many single people we got out here? Okay, awesome. This side of the room. This side, the married side. This is the single side. But I was 33 years old before I even ran into this woman, and so lived much of my life as a single man. And I just really want to, just some of what I want to share with you initially is some stuff that God did that was really critical for me. How many of you are married? How many married people in here? Okay. So it's about 50-50, which is what we figured it would be. I'm going to actually bring Susie up with me, and we're going to share with you just a very, very poignant thing that He did in us right before we were married. But after 11 years of marriage, we're realizing we're so glad He brought this in to our life, because it's something you need every single day, okay? So I just want to pray. I just want to pray for us before we jump in here, because whether you're single or whether you're married, one of the things, the main thing, actually, that I hope to bring out for you is the reality, and I believe this is really true, that God is desperately involved in this issue of our life. Someone who you're thinking of actually uniting yourself with, I don't think that God is up there just going, hey, good luck out there, But I think He wants to be a part of that, all right? So let's pray, and let's ask God to move. Lord, on this morning, again, it always hits me every Sunday, just knowing that every person in this room really matters to you, and knowing that you love them, and you know where everybody's at in their journey, whether they're single or whether they're married. My heart's desire for today is that you would meet each one of us, and that we just hear your voice, and then maybe some of what Susie and I can share today, that you'd take that truth and get into our hearts, and then we'd walk out of here with a greater confidence and hope that you're with us. And that's what I pray for in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, let me just start here. I actually did meet Susie when I was in my darkest time. So it was when I was in California, and again, that is a whole other story, but a real deep time of struggle for me. But one of the things I did have is I had a friend, and her name was Wendy. And Wendy and I were really, really tight. We would email each other a lot and talk to each other. That's all you could do back then. There wasn't any Facebook or Twitter or anything of that nature. But we would communicate with each other a lot. And one of the things that was just true is that we actually inspired each other. I feel like we encouraged each other's faith. I feel like there was a lot of friendship. We had a lot of fun together. But one day she called me out of the blue, and she had been talking with one of her mentors. Now, what I'm going to share here with you, I don't think this is one of those deals where I don't think this actually relates to everybody out there, but it may be something really critical for some of you. So anyway, her mentor told Wendy, she said, you know what, Wendy? She goes, I feel like you have so many good relationships with guys that sometimes, she goes, I think you're meeting every need that you have as a woman, except sexually, with your friends. And if that's the case, if you actually really want to get married, right now what you're doing is you're giving your heart in all these different ways to all these guys, and instead of saving it for one guy. So Wendy called me up and she said, you know what, Dave? She goes, I think that you are, she kind of put this whole thing on me, that you, and it was true, I had so many good friends that were girls, and especially with Wendy, and the challenge that came to us was this. I was saving my body for my wife, sexually. I had made that commitment that I was going to do that. Now, if you guys know my story, I didn't do that earlier in life. Was very involved sexually in much of my teen years and stuff. But once Christ came into my life when I was 19 years old, that stopped. And from that point on, I made a commitment that I would save myself for my wife. But what I didn't realize was, what's really important is not just that you save your body for your wife or your husband, but that you save your heart. And this is something, I've shared this with people, and it's like I'm speaking Chinese. But let me just try to help you understand what I didn't realize. And I know, and this was just for me. This isn't for everybody. But I know for me, I was doing that. Almost every need I had as a guy, the girls who were just friends in my life, there was intimacy, there was spiritual intimacy, there was friendship, there was fun, there was all this kind of stuff. And so what happened was, Wendy and I made a decision from that point on that we weren't even going to be together alone because we were so close with each other. In our hearts, it was funky because we weren't going to go any farther than that. But as soon as you throw a third person in the mix, everything changes, right? But we made the commitment, and I made the commitment that I wasn't just, if I wanted to go to a movie, I wasn't going to just go call a girl and do that. I was making a decision. Susie and I were talking yesterday. She said it well. She goes, really, what I was doing is I was deciding to love my wife when I didn't know her. And I just want to really encourage you guys, both men and women, if you're single today, you can actually love your future spouse right now by saving your heart, not just your body for them. But here's what happened for me. As soon as I couldn't just go be with a girl anytime I wanted to satisfy that legitimate need you have as a man, all of a sudden it made me really hungry for a wife. And I want to tell you, I think when I met Suze, if I had been satisfied in my heart, I may have not even noticed her. But because my heart was being kept for somebody, I think I was much more open to the idea. Does that make sense to anybody? Okay, enough nodding heads, we'll move on. All right. So if that's for anybody, it may be or it may not be, but I just know some of you might just need to think about that if being married is something you're interested in. Here's a second thing that happened to me. In my 20s, man, I loved my 20s. My 20s were just a great decade. It was a blast. I had a ton of friends. Everything was awesome. And then when I turned 30, the year I turned 30 years old, 3 of my closest friends and my younger brother got married. Okay, that's when I started looking around and going, hey, what about me? You know, and all of a sudden, I had so trusted God through my 20s to be the one who would supply my wife. And I was one of those guys, you know, I had a girlfriend. I don't know if anybody else. I had a girlfriend when I was in like first grade, you know, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, you know. I mean, I always had a girlfriend. My older brother would say, he thought I was going to get married when I was like 6, you know, or something, just because so then I get out of college and I get in my 20s and everything's good. So when I hit 30, I really started to doubt. And again, I just wanted to share this with you because I'm sure there's somebody in here. If you've been waiting for a while, you start to wonder, is God really interested in this area of your life or not? And I started to question that big time. And I started to believe that he didn't care. And if he doesn't care, then I got to care. If God isn't going to move on this, then maybe I need to take responsibility for it myself. And that's what I started to do. So I tried to make things happen, and I worked at these relationships, and I did all this kind of stuff. And some of you may be there right now. And I just want to encourage you that one of the things that happened for me was God showing up in a pretty powerful way. And I say this to you a lot here. I'm going to say it again. Okay? Read this thing. Okay? Now, I know as a human being that it's really hard to read this thing. I'm telling you, I'm going to tell you again, God will speak to you directly about whatever's going on right now in your life, and he'll meet you. He loves you. He wants literally a relationship with you. It is not about learning things about God and then following religious rules. That is not the life God has for us. And so again, even last week, my own time reading this word, he spoke to me so clearly and so directly. And I know he'll do that for you as well. Okay, so that's a side note. That's for free. So I'm in California. I pull up my Bible one morning and I read Luke 11. Luke chapter 11 is where Jesus' disciples look at Jesus and they go, man, Jesus, teach us how to pray because the way you connect with the Father is so different than the way we do. Would you teach us how to do this? So in Luke chapter 11, he does the Lord's Prayer, right? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And he gets through that. And then in verse 5, it says this. He said to them, he's going to tell a story. Suppose one of you has a friend, and he goes to him at midnight and says, friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread, because a friend of mine on a journey has come to me, and I have nothing to set before him. Now, you got to catch every detail of this story. What time is it? Okay, awesome. It's midnight. This is late. Now, and it was so weird. I was just talking to somebody 2 days ago about this. This is weird for us because when it's midnight, you know, what are we doing at midnight? We're watching movies. We're out at the show. We're living life at midnight. You guys, they had no electricity. You know what happened at like 8 o'clock when the sun went down? They went down because there wasn't anything to do. So it's midnight. That means they've been sleeping for at least 3 to 4 hours, okay? Now, the other thing you need to understand, in this culture, if somebody showed up to your house, you had to give them something to eat. If you didn't give them the hospitality in this culture, if you didn't provide food for them when they showed up to your house, it was like just a slap in their face, okay? You needed to do that. So it's midnight, they've been sleeping, or it's midnight, and somebody shows up at this guy's door, and he goes, okay, I need to figure out what to do here. So he goes to this guy at midnight, and he says that to him. And then verse 7. Then the one inside answers, don't bother me, the door is already locked, and my children are with me in bed, and I can't get up and give you anything. See, now here's the other thing we need to understand about this culture. In that culture, they didn't have homes with like 4 or 5 bedrooms, okay? Now today, we all have our own bedroom and all that kind of stuff, and we have our privacy. In those homes, everybody slept together in one room. So again, it's midnight. They've been sleeping for 3 hours, all of them together in one room, and a door and a knock comes on the door, okay? Because somebody's desperate because they need to feed their friend because he got visited. And then he says this, I tell you, this is verse 8, I tell you, though he will not get up and give him the bread because he is his friend, Yet because of the man's boldness, he will get up and give him as much as he needs. So, here's what hit me. Susie and I actually had an experience like this. If it was midnight and somebody showed up to your door in this culture and you knew you needed to provide some food and you didn't have any, who are you going to go to? Who are you going to go to? Susie and I had a situation like this. Anybody see the movie U-42? Anybody? Okay, it was a real popular movie. So Susan and I, we watched this movie, and it's a submarine movie. It's, all this kind of stuff. It's underwater and all that kind of stuff. It's like 1 a.m. when the movie's over, and I walk into my dining room, and water is gushing through, like literally like pouring through our dining room ceiling. And if anybody knows me, I'm about as handy as, I don't have any hands. I have no idea what I'm doing whatsoever, but I did know enough to at least go down and try to turn off the main water thing. I thought that'd be a good idea. And so I get down there and I go to turn it and nothing happens. It's still leaking. So I'm sitting there, I'm going, oh my gosh, it's 1 a.m. and I can't have water continue to pour through my dining. Who do you call? Who would you call? I call my buddy Dan Ross. Dan's a great friend. He's the guy who actually drove with me from Detroit all the way to California nonstop. He was the guy we were just best friends, and Dan builds homes. So I sat and I thought, you know what? I can call Dan Ross at 1 a.m. Why? First of all, because I know he could help me. I know he'd know the answer. And secondly, because he's my friend. See, what this passage here is saying, and I'll just try to get this point across quickly here. What this passage was saying, what God said to me, is, hey, David, when are you going to start knocking on my door again? Why did that guy go to his friend at midnight? You know why? Because he knew he was the friend who would give him what he needed. And he had the boldness to ask him. Just yesterday, Susan and I were sitting there. We're actually talking about this story and about the day and what we're going to share. And while we're doing that, Ashlyn comes up. And I don't know if you guys do this, but in our home, if we're in conversation, the kid has to come in and just put their hand on the shoulder, and just kind of wait. So Ashlyn comes in and she puts her hand on the shoulder. She's like, and Susie's like, Ashlyn, hold on. She comes over here and goes, she's trying so hard to do what she's supposed to do. And so Susie, we just finally said, we just can't right now. Just go back to your room, And Susie said this. She goes, man, if only I would come with that much intensity to God the way that Ashlyn comes to me. That's this parable. So God told me, I just want to say, if you're single here today and you've given up on God and you're trying to make things happen yourself, what he said to me was, David, when are you going to come and ask me? When are you going to come and ask me to give you what you need? Because you guys, I just believe with all my heart, again, who you knit your life with is not a small deal. It's big to him. Last thing, this is what he says in verse 11. He goes, which of you fathers, if your son asks for a fish, will give him a snake instead? And I remember, you guys, some of you were saying, when I was single, I just thought, you know what? I don't know if God will give me a fish. I think he'll give me a snake. Do you ever feel like that when you're single? Like, man, if I let God choose, I don't know what I'm going to end up with. I remember one time thinking, man, if only, my mom could choose my wife, that'd be awesome because I know she loves me. But I really doubted God that much. And then he goes on and he says this, or if he asks for an egg, we'll give him a scorpion. If you then, though you are evil, which means basically you guys are warped. You're not perfect in the way you do things. You're messed up. And even though you're messed up, you know how to give good gifts to your children. How much more will your Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask him? And I just know for me, what I did after I read that is I felt like God was saying to me, hey, David, I really still am your Father. And I do still really love you. And I know this has been a really hard road. I know it's been a lonely road. And I know even everything else, how dark of a period of time that was for me. But in that moment, what I did is I took my hands off the wheel and tried to stop making relationships happen. And I put them up in the air and decided to let God do what he wanted to do. And I just want to encourage you, if you're there today, that he is a God who is our Father, who's not evil, okay? And wants to come alongside us. So, At this point, I'd love to ask my beautiful wife to come up on the stage. And I know she doesn't do this much, so would you give her a warm welcome as she pops up here? Awesome. So, so little did I know that this would be God's answer for me. And what we want to do, just real quick, you guys, is share just a principle that he really hit us with in a pretty deep way that allowed us to something we've been trying to practice now for about 11 years. But ready?
Yeah.
So here we go. I'm going to start, and I'm going to let her share her side. We met. I was actually in Southern Cal. Susie was in Missoula, Montana, and we met at a conference in New Mexico. Okay, so God can do crazy things and do what he wants to when it's time. And as I was driving back to California, my buddy said, "Man, too bad she lives in Missoula," And I was like, "Yeah, that does stink." But every time I went home, every time I would meet with God again in my own personal time, all I could feel was him impressing her on my heart. And I was really working right then to be a guy who was going to be obedient to God no matter what. And so I just took the step and contacted her. And long, incredible story. I got to do it short. Eventually went up to spend a week with her at Thanksgiving to see if there was any reason even to do this. And after about 3 days, I had a guy tell me this, my brother actually, and I think it's incredible, was really helpful for me. And that is, you got to know what your non-negotiables are. Okay, if you're single today, do you know what your non-negotiables are? In other words, these are the things that have to be there for me to even consider you, okay? And I, being 33, I kind of knew what my non-negotiables were by that time. And after 3 days, I knew that she was those. And not from any conversation we had. She wasn't trying to impress me. In fact, this was awesome. The very first morning, that we're sitting there. I'm down with the breakfast with her mom and her sister-in-law, and Susie walks down with her hair pulled back, no makeup on at all, and just comes right down. I'm like, that rocks. Seriously, I'm like, she's not trying to do anything to show me who she is. But in conversation, listening to her talk to her mom and listening to her friends talk to me, I finally knew that the non-negotiables were there. So I go out and I take a walk. And I just to really pray to God. She needed to do some work. And I was out in this field, in the middle of nowhere, Missoula, and I just had an encounter with God. This is my defining moment, okay? These kind of moments don't happen very often, but it happened. And I just stopped in my tracks, and I felt like God said this to me. "Hey, David, this is my daughter, and I love her." Now, you guys remember going on a date and getting to the door and having Dad answer the door? How intimidating that is. Imagine what it's like to get to the door and have God standing at the door. That's what it felt like for me. Like, "Hey, I'm really interested in asking out your daughter." "Yes, and David, this is my daughter." Can I to all you men out there who are married, do you know that your wife is his daughter? And he loves her. And this was the catchphrase. And then he said to me in my heart, "And I'm choosing you to be the one that I get to love her through. This is my daughter, and I love her, and I'm choosing you to be the one that I get to love her through." I want to tell you, everything changed in that moment. Because usually when you're checking somebody out, that's what you're doing, right? You're checking somebody out. And you're saying, "Is she this, and is she that, and is she this, and is she right for me, and will she do this, and does she cook good, and is she," all this kind of stuff. And in that moment, I feel like, sorry, throw that there. Very important to me. But in that moment, what God did, you guys, and I just want to say this so badly to you today, he helped me to realize, David, it has nothing to do with you. If you're going to engage with this woman, it's going to be so you get to love her. And all of a sudden, it wasn't about if she's right for me. Then it becomes, am I right for her? And I literally fell on my face because it was an unbelievable, the responsibility all of a sudden felt that God would actually choose me to be a vessel of his love to her. Do you guys catch the difference here? And I've been praying that you would, that when you get married, the purpose is so that you get to be a vessel of love to the other person, and that's what your focus is. So guys, is your wife that valuable to you? Do you understand how valuable she is to your Father, our Father in heaven? And if so, he's chosen you. He's chosen you to be the one that he gets to love her through. And that became the focus for me from that day forward. So that was my defining moment.
Mm-hmm. So his defining moment, he knew he was going to marry me after 3 days. I was a little bit behind schedule.
She didn't know I existed.
Really for me, the moment when God changed my life forever was later in our relationship. So our courtship was only 7 weeks long. So much later is 7 weeks, but it felt like a long time. For me, it happened really 2 days before he proposed, and then on Valentine's Day, something really significant happened. But I feel like in order to understand like what God did in my life, I just want to help you connect a little bit with kind of who I am as a person. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a dreamer. I dream big things for my life. My big joke with my friends is God loves you and Susie has a wonderful plan for your life. People will come to me, Amy King came to me and told me she just would love to adopt someday, and by the time she left my house, I was convinced she was going to change the entire orphanage system in the country of Russia. And all my life, growing up in the glory of Colorado and hiking and being out there, how I'm wired, it just stirred in me this sense that when I grow up, I'm gonna do something glorious. I'm gonna do something worth doing. I didn't know what it would be, but I knew I wanted to change the world. And when I fell in love with Jesus in college years, that desire to do something big really became this desire to just love God, like to do something big, love the world, go to tramp around the globe, do whatever. I just dream big dreams. And but I had my ideas of what that would look like. I had my ideas of what I could do well and what I wanted to do and what would fulfill me. And my senior year in college, God just really tweaked that and changed my heart and my mind and said, that's not what I made you for. I made you to love people. And at that point, I decided to go into a life of full-time, just mission work and ministry work. And that had nothing to do with me, but with God's call on my life. And what I discovered as I stepped into that is, this is what I was dreaming about in those mountains of Colorado. This is what I was made for. So 9 years later, David walks into my life. And at the time I met David, I was doing what I knew I was created to do and loving every minute of it. And people who knew me then knew that I had told them, please shoot me if I ever marry a pastor.
or drive a minivan.
Yeah.
She's 2 for 2.
We don't drive a minivan. And I was very reluctant to marry for a lot of reasons. Very reluctant to let anyone into my heart. And yet, after God freed me, it took me a while, but when God finally did what he needed to do to free me up to love David with all my heart, something shifted in my world. And when I went into ministry, a friend gave me a plaque. It says, Susan Leah Opitz, called according to God's purpose, not sent from men nor through the agency of man, but through Jesus Christ and God the Father. I carried this with me all over the world. I took it everywhere I went, and I really, really had a deep sense that I was living out God's purpose for my life. And when we got engaged, And Valentine's Day, we said, okay, let's give each other something symbolic. I knew that this was his. That my calling was to love this man with all my heart. And in doing that, my deepest desires and dreams for glory would be more fulfilled than I could ever imagine. This is where my deepest desire to change the world is fleshed out. And it really has been that.
Yeah. But the story is, seriously, like when Susie had some deep dreams and things that she wanted to do, and had ideas, not only of that, but even what kind of guy would come in. Is it our kids?
Nope.
Okay. So, but even the type of guy that would come into her life, and one of the things we realized is I wasn't that guy. In fact, my nickname for a while was the Dream Killer. So, but that was just, seriously, it was really, there were some deep things that Susie had for her life, and I wasn't it. And one of the things, I didn't say this for service, one of the things, a really deep principle that Susie has shared here, is she wanted to go to Oxford and study, and she wanted to write, and she wanted to read, and you didn't say at the service, but what God said to her was, I didn't call you to books, I called you to people. And she thought that was it, but when she went the ministry side, even though that wasn't what she initially thought, but that's what she felt like God called her to do, she found it. Then she found it. When she met me, I'm a pastor, shoot me, I can't climb a ladder. She had dreams of marrying some rock climber, they'd scale the Everest together, and here I am stumbling to get up 3 rungs on a ladder. There's just all this stuff. It's like, I'm not the guy that she would have dreamed of, and yet, as we move forward into it, then I was the guy. No, I'm just kidding. But there's a really important story that we need to tell you, and I want you to go ahead and start with Glenn.
Okay. So the year before I met David, my dad passed away, and David and I had this conversation about the loss that I was experiencing without Dad. That one of the things that I didn't realize when I lost my dad was how hard it would be to meet my spouse and not have him there to bless that. And so really we kind of had this conversation, well, who do you ask, for my hand in marriage? And we decided he would ask my pastor, Glenn, for my hand in marriage. And I never told that to Glenn. I hadn't talked to him about this. But I knew I was flying down to California, and I would see David in 2 days. And he had taken me into a ring shop the last time we were together.
Hint, hint.
Yeah. Something was going on. And I knew I wasn't ready. If he proposed, I was not ready to say yes with all my heart. And so I asked Glenn to come over and pray with me, because what was going on in my mind, what I understood about it, is I didn't want to marry. I loved what I was doing. I loved being with God. I just loved my relationship with Jesus, and I didn't want a guy coming in and messing it up, basically. And Glenn was really wise. He just said, "Suze, you could do that. You could hang on to your life the way it is right now, but you're not hanging on to Jesus. You're hanging on to a way of relating to Jesus, and that's totally different. Your relationship with him will change over the years, and you need to cling to him." So we started to pray, and he was praying for me that God would work in my life to free me up to do what I need to do to follow him. And halfway through his prayer, he just stopped, and he sat back, and he just said, "I just feel like I need to stop praying and just tell you something." So I never told you this, but when your dad passed away, I felt the burden of a dad move into my lap. And I have been praying for you since that day and loving you as a daughter. And when I met David, I met him with the eyes of a dad. And I asked him the questions your dad would ask.
Yes, you did.
And I want you to know, as if you were my own daughter, I can tell you right now, yeah, this is a good man. And I affirm his pursuit of you. And I think I need to tell you, your dad is smiling on this. He loves you. He's proud of you. He loves this man, and he's chosen him. And basically, by this time, I'm a puddle. I'm just a puddle of tears. I'm weeping. I really, like, this just came out of the blue, and it was so deep and so right. Anyway, so Glenn took the hint and just left. And I called David, and everything had changed, and it freaked him out. But I'm going to let him tell that story.
See, because I don't know about you guys, but like guys, you like the hunt, you know, you like the pursuit, and I had that because Susie was constantly holding me like this, like no, just enough to keep going, but and I knew that, and to be honest with you, it's part of where my heart is warped. Is I know that type of relationship where you work for it. So she gives me a call, and all of a sudden, man, it's like, so she'd been totally reserved, and on that phone call, the dam broke, man. And she just started gushing on me. She sang to me. She sang 2 songs to me, you know.
It's so embarrassing. Never again.
Yeah, it's true. Never again. No, but what was weird was... So I'm sitting there, I'm laying on the floor, and I'm talking on the phone, and seriously, you guys, all of a sudden, I start to wig. Because I don't know, wait a second, this isn't the girl that I've been pursuing. And I don't know how to be loved like this. And I was going to tell her, like, hey, that's enough, thanks, you know, appreciate it, you know. And seriously, I felt God say to me very clearly, shut up and receive. Shut up and receive. I'm letting you be loved. And I remember laying on the floor so hard. And I did. I shut up and I let her just do it. And you guys, it was weird. So when Valentine's happened, I was really excited. And then she gives me this. And she tells me that her calling, you know, is to love me. I went home and I wigged. And I'm like...
Thanks, honey.
Yeah, I mean... And so now all of a sudden I was the one doing this. Mm-hmm. And I was holding her, and I was starting to get cold and more distant. And I came up to visit again, and it was pretty obvious. And
my ring on my finger.
Yeah. And now the guy she said yes to is getting weird. And so to the point where we asked Glenn to come in and speak with us. And he went right at me. And he said, so Dave, what's going on? And I explained, and he said, so then why aren't you ending the relationship? Why are you continuing to go? Would it be just too embarrassing, you know, since the invitations have already gone out to say... I mean, he lays it out, man, you know. And but here's what hit me. I said, no, the reason I'm still going is because I know the problem isn't her, it's me. See, I didn't know how to be loved. And when somebody started really loving me, I didn't know how to do it. Well, who's the problem? The one loving? No. There's something wrong with my heart. And I remember, you guys, my walk on that field where God said, hey, David, I'm choosing you to be the one to love her. It wasn't about me. And I'll tell you, man, for me, you know what it meant to love her? It meant let her love me. And that was hard. It was really hard. And I know some of you guys are going, you're weird. And I go, I know, I am. But that was just a really difficult thing. And so then Glenn went on.
Yeah, so then he turned to me and just asked me, you know, you can't marry David thinking your love's going to change him. What if he's like this? And literally, there were times when my love language is touch. If I touched him, you could feel his skin crawl. That's how intense this was. And he said, what if he doesn't change your entire honeymoon? What if he doesn't change for a year? You ready to go through with this? What if he never changes? And you spend the rest of your life pouring your love out on a guy who is repulsed by that love. You gonna do it? And because of this, because of what Jesus had done in my life, it was a no-brainer. Yeah. Absolutely. That's what I want. No matter how hard it is, I'm going to love him.
So I'm sitting there listening to her answer, and I'm like, that's amazing. And so here it is. Let me just share with you guys. Today we're going to take off, and we're going to celebrate our 11th anniversary. And but but I want to tell you, this principle right here has been the key every day to our relationship. And I'm serious, you guys. I don't know what it was, but seriously, if she would touch me like that, for me to love her meant just let her do it, and get rid of the tense jaw. And
he has changed.
Well, that's it. You know what? I actually like her love now. It's pretty cool. We're doing a lot better. No, but seriously, but here's what I want to share with you, okay? Because that's our story. Your story is going to be different. But here's the principle, okay? God, all you men, God has called you to love your wife. And for me, whatever that means, this is what it means for me to love Suze. But in Ephesians 5, it says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. See, you don't wake up in the morning and everything's ooey gooey every day. Anybody? You wake up and you have to realize, I got to give up myself for her. And Susie had to give up so much of who she was for me. But God said, you know what, Susan? Your calling now is to love that man. And I'll just say, because Susie wanted me to do this part. So on behalf of Susie, to all you women, if you're married today, your calling is to love your husband. I've met with some people just recently. I just told them, I said, hey, here's the deal. Your spouse needs to be the most important thing on this planet. Jesus rules my life, but on this earth, nobody gets more. You guys won't even come close to her. And I think that's the way it's supposed to be. And it needs to be the same way back. And you guys, so here's the deal. Just to close, I say, but you know what? That takes a lot of strength because you wake up and you're weak. We're all selfish. There are mornings where I wake up and I know it's all about me. And this is going to be an ugly day when it's all about me. And so what do I have to do? I have to, on that day, again, remember, what is my calling? This is what I want to say. I really believe for me that marriage at its essence is actually about worship. Marriage is me realizing it's not about me, but it's saying no to me and yes to God, who said, Nelson, love that woman. And for Susie, it's saying no to herself and yes to God's call to be my wife. And I just want to say, for all of you here today, you may need to, all of us do, we need to sit before God and get his love into our hearts. His love is everlasting. His love never fails. His love goes after the weaknesses within us. He loves you and me, even though we're weak and fall short. And that love he can pour into your heart. And so I just want to say, man, if you're single here today, wait on the Lord. Knock on his door. Go to him and trust him and cling to him. And if you're married today, wait on the Lord. Cling to him and trust him and ask him to come in and help you to be the husband or the wife that he needs you to be. And I think the application for all of us is maybe just to go home today and just to say, okay, where is it that I'm still living for me? And confess it to God as the sin that it really is. And then receive his forgiveness, receive the Spirit, because inside you, Christ is always about the other person. He always is. And he can help us through this deal.